Welcome to the SEO Insider with your host, Seth Price, founder of Blue Shark, taking you inside the world of legal marketing and all things digital.
Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to be back. We have Dylan Ruga here with Steno, the founder and president, as well as chief legal officer. Welcome, Dylan.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for having me.
For those that don't know Steno, it's a court reporting service. That's sort of like the what it does, but it's a game changer in many ways. First time I heard about it, I thought this was genius, and I think it's going to change the legal world for sure. Tell everybody what makes Steno special.
Well, like you mentioned, Steno does court reporting, but we do it a little bit differently. So the first thing, or kind of the biggest thing that differentiates us, is that we will defer all of our payments until our client's case is resolved. And for me, as a practicing plaintiff's lawyer, this is a huge thing that I struggled with when I started my firm, was managing cash flow. I was growing my firm from, really just a couple cases to, over 100 cases that we were litigating at any given time. And I felt pretty good about it until I looked at my bank account and saw it was empty. And I figured, well, what's happening here? And I was really advancing all these costs for my clients. And one of the biggest costs that I was advancing was for court reporting. And so I started looking around for a court reporting company that would defer its payments until my case is resolved. And I wasn't able to find any that were willing to do that for me, especially on a non-recourse basis, meaning that if I lost my case, I didn't want to have to pay for any of the court reporting.
And that you almost buried the lead. Deferring is awesome. But to me, we've taken a couple big hits over the years, right? And, you got to try the big ones to, and when that happens, it's really painful.
Look, we're all good at, or we think we're pretty good at the intake process. And everybody that I talk to says, well, that's great, but I never lose a case. And none of us like to think we ever lose cases. But if we're being honest, and if we really try cases, we're going to take some losses along the way. And that's a tough pill to swallow when you've got to absorb, it could be six figures or more on costs that you've invested in a case.
No, I mean, look, so I get it. You have one of the top venture first round funds behind you, which is in of itself the same guys who launched Uber and a number of my friends' companies. So obviously you have good people. Other people have seen this and had the same idea I did, which is like, wow, you just decided to slice the bread. For a lot of people, the idea of financing cases, it's a complicated piece. There's some people that are like good with it and they just pass costs along to clients 100%. Some people eat it, they have their own credit lines and they eat it internally. I feel like one of the things that this has done is taken a percentage of that question off the table, in that not only is it deferred, but if it goes sideways, you don't need that rainy day piece. Give us an idea first. How did it come to be? I mean, you talked about your need for it, but it's great. Okay, so you couldn't find it anywhere. Similar, right? I couldn't find SEO done the way I liked it. I started Blue Shark. How did you come to say, okay, I can't find it? Starting a court reporting company, especially a venture-backed one, is a whole nother step.
Yeah, so I had the idea for Steno and started kind of grumbling to my friends that somebody ought to start an agency that does this. And some of my friends kind of just said, well, you should do it. And I chuckled and said, yeah, with all my free time, because I just started my firm. But it was interesting to me. And so I thought maybe I should reach out to a couple of people that I am friends with who had previously started startups, just to say, hey, what is, what is your advice? What's the first step I should take in kind of exploring this? And one of the people that I called is Greg Hong. Greg previously started a company called Reserve, which was a competitor to OpenTable. So they were in the restaurant.
Was it iReserve?
It was, I'm not sure if they were ever iReserve. I think it was just Reserve.
Yeah, he was part of possibly the late 90s internet startup period.
Yeah, around there, maybe a little bit later, but kind of in that same era.
I think I crashed one of his parties.
So Greg, I got to know Greg over the years because Reserve was sued for trademark infringement. And by another company that used the word reserve in kind of a similar space. And when that happened, Reserve hired me to defend them in the trademark action. And so I got to know Greg because he was the CEO at the time and I defended his deposition. And when I came up with the idea for Steno, I picked up the phone and said, hey, Greg, what do you think about this? and what's some advice that you have for me? And he said, well, could you send me a model? Have you put together any type of, like financing model? I said, sure. I sent him a spreadsheet on a Friday. Now, I didn't know at the time that I had spoken to Greg that he was in the process of selling Reserve and was looking for his next gig. But the next Monday he called me and said, I looked at the model all weekend and I love the idea. I want to come out to LA and start the company with you. And I said, great. And we were off to the races. And so we were fortunate in that we were able to leverage Greg's relationships with VC firms from Reserve. And because he did a good job there and had a successful outcome at Reserve, they were more than happy to talk to us about Steno and back this company as well.
That's awesome. The court reporting services, and again, is something that as a plaintiff's lawyer, I guess as a defense lawyer, or litigator, it's sort of a necessary evil. And, you like your rep and they're nice to you, but I always get the impression that there's a catchment of court reporters that are just contracting with whoever is out there. How do you sort of talk to me a little bit about, if you're in the court reporting, if you're in the lawyering game and you have your favorite court reporters, is it by choosing a Steno, are these people still accessible, or do most court reporting services have their own, catchment of court reporters?
Yeah, so every court reporter pretty much across the country, and it's a pretty broad statement, but it's basically true, is an independent contractor, and they all work with all of the court reporting agencies in town. So we work with the same court reporters that our competitors work with. And so if a particular lawyer or firm has a relationship with court reporters or videographers or interpreters that they enjoy working with, we're more than happy to schedule those people on Steno's jobs and, again, defer payment or do whatever else that you're asking us to do.
And talk to me a little about the economics, right? Because obviously there's no free lunch, right? There has to be funding for it. How does it work? Walk me through the traditional sort of court reporting model versus how Steno works from the point of view of the economics to the law firm.
Sure. So court reporting typically is charged on a per page basis. There's other charges that get built in there too, but the headline number is usually the page rate. And so if a normal court reporting job that's done on net 30 terms may cost $1,000, we'll offer that to all of our clients. If you want to pay us a net 30, we'll do it for you for $1,000 in this example. But if you want to defer payment on it and not pay us until your case closes, we charge about a 30% premium. So that same deposition, instead of costing $1,000, will cost $1,300. And the way it works is when the deposition's over, we send an invoice, and the invoice just says $1,300. And instead of saying pay us in 30 days, it says pay us when your case settles. And that $1,300 remains constant. There's no interest component or anything else that gets tacked onto it. So it doesn't matter if it takes you 3 months or a few years to settle your case and get paid. You know that you owe us $1,300 for that particular deposition, and that way you can track your costs along the way. And so on our end, we refer to this as kind of micro litigation finance, because we are essentially financing this receivable for you. And on the back end, we have a debt facility that we borrow against on that invoice, which allows us to continue our operations and pay the court reporter right away. So the court reporters are paid within a day or two of turning in the transcript. So they are paid out right away. We hold the paper, and we worry about collecting later.
And I assume built to that is profit, as well as a write-off percentage for some percentage of cases that lose a trial, presumably. Or
that's right. We historically we've seen about a 5% loss rate. We've modeled into our financial model a number higher than that. So at this point, a 5% loss rate is well within kind of what we expected to see, and it works fine for the business.
That's awesome. Question I got asked, but when somebody heard I was going to be interviewing you, which I thought I'd pass along, is what happens if a case goes up on appeal?
Mm-hmm.
There's a
the simple answer to any kind of question like this is we only get paid when you get paid. So if it goes up on appeal and takes 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and you don't get paid till after that, then we're waiting to get paid at that point. If your client drops you and you put a lien on the case, and you eventually get paid back your costs, then we expect to get paid when you get paid. If a client drops you and you don't assert a lien for whatever reason, then we write that off as a loss. And so the short answer is we get paid when you get paid.
It seems like in a way that you borrowed a little bit from the title insurance model. Bail bonds similarly, where somebody's writing, you're essentially writing, and I assume like anything else, if somebody loses all their cases, that's probably not an ideal client for you. But if you're within the standard deviation, it's an awesome win-win.
That's right. I mean, like anything, there's a bell curve, in terms of, how good firms are and how many cases they're going to win, how many cases they're going to lose, and how long cases take to resolve over time. But again, we've built in a certain assumptions around the loss rate. And so far, we've been doing this for just over 3 years, and we're seeing numbers that are well within that expected loss rate.
What have you learned? There's an amazing amount of data you must have seen. There's, when you're on a plaintiff's listserv, you see the celebrations, right? You see the big wins. And at least in my market, I know that a number of these huge wins that are incredible very often come down to earth later on or before the actual email was sent. Wanted to see, like, what are some of the things that you may not have realized being a rock star? You're part of, people don't realize this, but you're part of the glitterati West Coast trial lawyer world. But what have you learned, sort of like, again, even in that world, a lot of bravado, a lot of testosterone, a lot of badass women and men trying cases. But have you seen stuff that you're like, wow, I didn't know this before I was, on the other side?
Well, everybody talks about kind of the outlier big number results. And what they don't talk about are the cases that they lose the trial, or the cases that for one reason or another, they expect a 7 to 8 figure outcome and they receive a 5-figure outcome. And I see that way more often than I thought that I would see that. Again, most people don't talk about the losses. Most people don't talk about the cases where some evidence shows up during the course of litigation that they weren't expecting, and now their case value plummets 90%. But it happens more often than you think, and we see it a lot in our business at Steno. But thankfully, most of our clients who take on litigation matters, even though they may not get the amount of money that they were hoping to get out of the case, almost always get something out of the case, which is enough to pay their costs and put some money in their client's pocket and put some money in the firm's coffers as well.
No, it's funny. I equate it almost to a visit to Vegas. I have a lot of friends who play the electronic games, whether it be slots or other games, and they love it. And I see the winnings on Facebook. I'm with them when they win. They win great amounts of money and people are pulling cash out. But these casinos are, not built on people. Over time, there's a truism that's going to happen. And I assume, just like, it's not like people are taking 8-figure cases and turning them into nothing. Many of those cases, but, a couple of bad facts may bring them down to earth along the way. Anything else as far as, like stuff I've seen from the perspective of a marketing agency looking under the hood of a lot of firms, that the cash flow is so incredibly tight and the swings can be so dramatic. I assume in one sense they love you because you're providing part of the answer for them. Are there other things about law firm management that you have gleaned? I mean, you have a boutique practice, for, to stereotype it. Are you seeing stuff that, reasons that, things like sort of any not cautionary tales, but any lessons learned looking at large firms having bigger swings, do small firms, anything that you've picked up looking at just crowdsourcing the numbers that you get to see?
We don't have that much visibility into our clients' overall firm financial picture. So I don't want to kind of overstate the data that we have there. What we do have is a lot of deposition transcripts. We have thousands upon thousands of deposition transcripts. And so one of the things that we're thinking about doing is culling those transcripts to see what patterns can be taken out of those transcripts by matching the transcripts to the ultimate case outcomes, which we're privy to most of the time, and figure out what we can learn from the deposition transcripts themselves, and then the case outcome, and see if we can find anything in there that, whether it's asking questions in a particular way, or using particular cadence, or whether on the flip side, if it's a defense outcome, whether there are particular objections or things that defense lawyers are saying or doing in depositions that may give them a leg up in the litigation process.
No, I love that. Every once in a while I get pitched by new companies, and there was one that came with AI, and they were trying to use that to be able to value cases for lending purposes. I thought it was ahead of its time, and I think it was, and they've pivoted to other work. But what I love here is the idea that, the idea of AI is, from a sample of one, you can't get much, but if you could take every case that hits it out of the park and every case that doesn't, the two extremes, and looking for commonalities, it would be kind of cool, just as one of those internal red flags. Imagine if you could send your clients, we've sent a bot through your transcripts, and based on these pieces, you should be wary that you're statistically significant to either have a negative outcome or a positive outcome based on what you're seeing. That's kind of a cool future ahead.
Yeah, I think so. And another thing that we've kind of talked about doing at Steno, which we're not planning on doing in the short term, but maybe in longer term, is assigning some type of credit scores to law firms based on the number of cases that they take that have good outcomes versus bad outcomes. And like you were saying before, I mean, there is a bell curve of firms out there in terms of how good they are or how likely they are to sign on winning cases. And so we have a pretty good history of working with firms over a long period of time. We can start to look at individual firms and say, this firm is a better credit risk than that firm, and those credit scores.
Look, you won't say it, but I mean, to me, I wouldn't be surprised if version 2.0, that credit score, whatever you want to call it, might affect pricing, and which you sort of in one sense would want to, right? If you're a firm that really loses 1% of the time versus a firm that's taking huge risks and losing 10% of the time, at some point that I'm sure will get baked into a pricing metric.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about, but I have no plans to implement.
Right. I'm just saying, like, you can see the future of it. Sure. Are people nipping at your heels? Are you seeing imitations of the most sincere form of flattery? Are you seeing it out there? What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, we've seen it. We haven't seen it done as well. The reason why is that what I think makes Steno unique is that we combine the service that we're offering, which is the court reporting, with the litigation finance by packaging it in one invoice that kind of just goes naturally into your workflow at your firm. You don't really have to do anything differently at your firm. What we've seen other companies try to do is take a court reporting agency and then basically duct tape onto it a litigation finance company, and have those two companies work together to try to deliver to you what Steno is doing in an integrated, streamlined way. And the experience for the lawyers just isn't as good, because now you're dealing with two different companies, and they don't really know how to defer payment in this type of way. I expect that we'll see some of the bigger box court reporting agencies out there try to get into this model more. I've spoken with some of them, and I've heard that they like our model, and that they would like to start doing it down the road. It's just that some of the bigger court reporting agencies are owned by private equity companies, and they have a different kind of risk tolerance than the venture capital companies that are backing Steno.
That's awesome. Look, it sounds like your world is exploding, and I want to let you get back to changing the world, because really impressed by anything. Any final words for our audience today?
No, thanks for having me, Seth. It was great chatting with you, and anything Steno can do to help, I'm always around. People can reach me, just Dylan@steno.com.
Well, we look forward to watching your meteoric rise. It's really cool when somebody does something and you're like, yeah, that makes so much sense. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you for tuning in to the SEO Insider with Seth Price. Be sure to check back next week for fresh insights into building your brand's online presence. Episodes are available to stream directly on Blue Shark Digital's website.